Good people of the Grove, hey, it is time for growth groups. I'm excited about getting into Exodus chapter 16 and the first part of 17. So I just want to jump right in. No reminders. No, remember what growth groups are, although I'm really tempted to right now. Instead, let me dive right in. Let me shave a couple of minutes off of this video. We all should know by now what we're up to. So, look, like chapter 16, really, really interesting stuff, especially as the New Testament writers translate it, especially Jesus and Paul. And so really interesting as we dig in. So again, we're asking, what does this say about God? What does this reveal about humanity, me included? And then if it's me, I need to know, what am I supposed to do as a result? Not like, what are humans supposed to do about this? What must people do about this? No, I'm going to get with the Spirit, and the Spirit's going to help me discern, what does Lance need to do about this right now? I'm going to try and give you some pointers and all of that. Okay, here we go. What does this reveal about God? Well, I think a couple of different things, three things, more than that, but three things off the top of my head, really. And that is this: God takes offense when we grumble against our leaders. If you'll notice, in chapter 16, verse 2, it says that the people, the whole congregation, grumbled against Moses and Aaron. And then we'll go down to 16, verse 8, and it said that the Lord perceives this, right, as ultimately they're grumbling against him. You see it again in chapter 17, verse 2. Therefore, the whole people quarreled with Moses. Again, they quarreled, they complained, they grumbled against Moses, and then it gets translated as them testing the Lord. When we grumble against our leaders, that's political leaders too, that's spiritual leaders, that's teachers, that's mom and dad, every system that's been set up in regards to authority. Like when we grumble against the authority that God has set up over us, as Romans 13 says, we are grumbling against God himself. And God does not take that lightly. Instead, he takes offense at that, because ultimately what it means is that we do not trust God and his order of things, whether it be our parents, whether it be our bosses, that he sovereignly selected for us, whether it be our government officials, whether it be our pastors, elders, our neighbor group leaders, you name it. All across the board, when we grumble against them, more than just a simple complaint, a grumbling is met with accusation, right? Like, you don't know what you're doing. Surely we would have been better off in Egypt, and you don't really care about us anyways. That kind of grumbling, God does not take lightly. That's number one. Number two, when we grumble, God responds in grace. He hears us, and he gives us an answer even to a grumble. I'll get to this in a moment, but grumbling really isn't appropriate for the life of the believer. Complaining really isn't either. Do everything without complaining or arguing, as Paul says. And so what that means, though, is that we'll get to this. I don't want to give that part away. But here's what I would say. God is gracious to answer our grumbling, even when we don't do it right. Even when we're grumbling, even when we do this in a sinful way, God still hears our prayers and he responds with grace. He gives the Israelites manna. He gives them water from the rock. He could have let them starve, but he didn't. In his mercy and in his kindness, even when we mess it up, he responds in grace. That's really beautiful if you sit and think about it. And then finally, what does this reveal about God? Well, throughout this passage, what we'll find is an overarching theme that God really cares about our obedience. In John, Jesus says that if you love me, you'll obey me. Our love for Jesus is not demonstrated when we come together and just sing songs on a Sunday or give on a Sunday. Those are a part of obedience. But this is why we get down to, like, what am I supposed to do with it? I demonstrate my love for Jesus by being obedient in the little things, as much as they are the culturally important things and the corporately important things. He cares about my obedience. He cares about everything that we're up to. And in fact, it says that he tests us. He provides for us, but he also tests us. It says, behold, I'm about to rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them. And what do? They gather more than enough than what they're supposed to gather. And of course, worms eat it, and Moses gets angry, and God gets angry, and yet he does not judge them. He continues to provide for them. He gives them instruction. They don't obey, and God's anger is kindled in that, as well as his people. He cares. He cares about our obedience, even in the seemingly small things. Does he care? Well then, what does this passage reveal about us? I think this is what I was trying not to give away. We have a finite perspective on life's circumstances, and sometimes we get to grumbling when our right now is not as comfortable as we want it. It's not met with an immediate response from God through our prayers, though they may be grumbling. And so we start to grumble. We start to complain. We start to get, we go online and into comment sections, and it just gets bad, right? We saw this a couple of years ago with COVID. That was like the worst of us. Not just humanity, but Christianity. We get to the point where our circumstances get real bad or slightly uncomfortable, and we start to grumble and take it out on one another, which ultimately means we, again, are taking it out on God. I think we also struggle with control. I think this passage really reveals to me what's in the heart of humanity, what's in my heart. I don't like to be out of control, and when I'm out of control, it manifests itself in a rebellion against authority. When I don't like my circumstances, I have a tendency to lash out, whether in rebellion or in whatever it may be. It could be in all kinds of things. If I'm not in control, if I'm not in authority, so to speak, then I'll start to break out a little bit. It's only when I come into a loving, trusting relationship with my God, who is sovereign and orchestrates every little detail of my life, that I remember, oh, my God knows what I need. He is caring for me even in my disappointment. And what kind of life would I live if I remembered that day in and day out? But you can see God is testing them. Throughout this passage, and they don't do well with that. They actually respond, God testing what's in their hearts. He knows, but he wants to reveal what's in their hearts. Then they test him. And they basically say, is God with us or not? In chapter 17, verse 7. God tests him. He's allowed to do that. He's in authority. He's in control. We are not in control or in authority, and we are not allowed then to test him. And when we do, God takes that, of course, seriously. And then finally, what does this reveal about us? Well, I think what God is trying to show us, what he's trying to test in our hearts, is that our obedience, the level of our obedience, reveals the level of trust that we have in God. Will we only take today's manna, or will we store some away? Will we truly trust, as Jesus told us to pray, Lord, give me my daily bread, not tomorrow's bread, my daily bread. And will I be satisfied in what you provide for the day? That's difficult, and yet it leads us into, what must I do? As a result of all this that's being revealed about God, as a result of all this that's being revealed about humanity and me in particular, here's what I think, at least for me, came to the forefront. Number one, I need to learn to lament, but not complain and grumble. There's a whole book of lamentations. It's not a whole book of grumblings. It's not a whole book of complaints. When you read the book of Job, when you read the book of Psalms, you see a lot of lamentation. Lord, things are not as they should be in my life, in my marriage, in my parenting, in my work, in my heart, in this world. There's injustice. It's just not right. Lord, would you come and fix it? That's lamentation. Grumbling and complaining is, I want out, you did me wrong, and there's accusation again accompanying with that. I need to learn how to lament without complaint. And they are two different things. The other things that I was reminded of is that God takes the Sabbath really seriously. And I am still learning. Right now, actually, I'm in the red. Just really candid with everybody. With Easter and sending out koinonia and hiring 2 staff people and then Beat coming in town, I'm just in the red. And a lot of that has to do with me not putting boundaries around a Sabbath, a weekly Sabbath for me. And so I've got to get better about that. I need to restore some margin in my own soul. But here's what it takes. It takes gathering twice as much on a day that's not the Sabbath in order for me to have a Sabbath. And then once I have Sabbath, I can work from that rest. And so there's this cycle that you see in the scriptures, working for rest. You have to gather twice as much for Sabbath. And then once you get the Sabbath that God provides in his son Jesus, you work from that rest. And man, your work week is in order and a whole lot better, much less all of life. The last thing that I think for me that I need to do, I need to trust and look to Jesus. And this is what I hope all of us will look to as the true and greater bread from heaven. Go read John 6. If you're in a growth group, go read John 6. After you read Exodus 16 and 17, go read John 6. Go remind yourselves of what Paul said about Christ, who is the rock in the wilderness in 1 Corinthians 10. I mean, there is some beautiful understandings here that Jesus is saying, I am the bread of heaven. I am the manna. I am the one that though Moses provided daily bread in that way, I want to provide daily bread in a spiritual way. Would you come to me and feast? Matter of fact, you cannot come and be my disciple if you don't eat my flesh and drink my blood. That's what he says in John 6. It is a daily feast that Jesus sets before us, that if we will feast on him daily, go to him for our every need, look to him for the sustenance of our life, truly he will make good on the promise to give us everything we need for our souls. I hope this is helpful. I hope your growth groups are fruitful. I love you and I'll see you soon.